The running back issues continue to mount. We've lost Ramondre Stevenson. Derrick Henry had to leave early, although now it looks like he'll be okay. And Brian Robinson is even dealing with a hamstring now. So what is week 14 going to bring us? Hopefully my start and sit video is going to give you a little clarification on who you can play and who you probably should just leave on your bench. Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Look, I know a lot of you are probably super frustrated with running backs right now. And it's not like we've lost guys to season-ending injuries this year. We just keep getting guys that are bruised and battered and bumped. And because of that, they're missing maybe a couple of games here or there, or we're not really sure if they're going to play or not. And that makes things even more difficult on us. Heck, if a guy's gone for the entire season, we know we have to replace him. But if we don't know if a guy's going to play on a weekly basis or not, it makes things more difficult. And here's looking at you, Aaron Jones. Please get healthy. A lot of people out there need you. But let's go ahead and get ready to hop right into it. I'm going to be talking about every matchup on the Week 14 slate and what that means for your running back. So hit that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new here. Turn on the bell notifications if you haven't done so yet. And let's hop right into Thursday Night Football. Ooh. I don't know about you all, but I cannot wait for Thursday Night Football. And Bailey Zappi versus Mitchell Trubisky, said nobody ever in the history of the universe. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to be talking about running backs anyway, so that doesn't matter. But we found out this morning, Ramondre Stevenson, unfortunately, will be missing a few weeks with that ankle sprain, which means it's going to be Zeke Elliott leading the way down the stretch. And after Stevenson went out this past week, it was essentially Zeke and nobody else the rest of the game. Ty Montgomery saw 3 snaps in the third quarter, and outside of that, Zeke was out there for every single play. Pittsburgh is an okay matchup. Over the last 4 weeks, they have been much more stingy against the run game than what they were at the beginning of the season. Cam Hayward being back has definitely made a big impact on that side of the ball. So am I expecting huge numbers from Zeke this week? No, but if you're a Ramondre Stevenson owner, having Zeke was already a part of the plan. And if you are somebody that has very little help at the running back position and you were able to grab Zeke on waivers, then at least at this point you'll have somebody in your lineup that at least will be getting some touches. The Pats are currently allowing the 4th fewest rushing yards in the NFL right now. And we've seen kind of an uptick in Najee Harris's performance over the last few weeks. But this past week was just another example of why Jaylen Warren still deserves to get just as many touches as Najee Harris is on a daily basis. Najee Harris had more touches this past week, but once again, Jaylen Warren outperformed him in terms of efficiency, and that seems to have been the case all season long. Now, this matchup isn't going to leave a lot of room for that to happen. Will Najee Harris be the lead back once again? I wouldn't doubt it, but Jaylen Warren is going to be the guy with more upside because he's the one that is definitely going to have the big playability that Najee Harris just has not shown this season. Both of these guys are going to bring some risk, though. That New England defense, even though as a whole the team sucks, is very, very good. And they definitely could stop the run on Thursday night and make Mitchell Trubisky try to beat them through the air. I really just don't see a whole lot of upside for either of these guys, but the volume should still be okay. If you were to do a blind comparison and put Rachaad White's stats next to Bijan Robinson's stats, they would essentially be the same running back. Now, people are upset with Bijan Robinson for his head coach, first and foremost, but they spent a first-round pick on him, whereas Rachaad White, they spent a later-round pick. So the return on value has been a lot better with Rachaad White, and that's why people aren't complaining about Rachaad White, but are complaining about Bijan Robinson. Now, White has also been a little bit more consistent here over the last few weeks, where Bijan Robinson is having some of those up and down performances. But this is why looking at just high-level statistics is a really poor way to figure out how well players are doing at the NFL level. And this is a nice instance of why looking at just top-level statistics can be really misleading at times. Unfortunately, when you dive deeper on both of these running backs, even though Bijan Robinson has been more inconsistent at times this season, his underlying statistics, his advanced stats, and his efficiency stats show a running back that has a lot more long-term value than what Rachaad White does. Now with Rachaad White, again, he's giving you the fantasy points. So a lot of you don't even care at this point, and you've made that very clear in the comments. But just keep that in mind as we head into next year. Do not be surprised if Tampa Bay brings in somebody else to help Rachaad White. But that's for next year. For this week, this matchup is going to be super difficult for both of these running backs. Both defenses do a really, really good job of stopping the run. Tampa Bay is currently allowing the 10th fewest rushing yards and the 10th fewest fantasy points to the running back position, where Atlanta is allowing the 15th fewest yards and the fewest fantasy points to the running back position. So it's going to be a tough matchup for both of these guys. And Rachaad White, unfortunately, last week still lacked a lot of the efficiency that we needed to see in a really good matchup going up against Carolina. Yeah, he put together a decent fantasy performance because he ended up scoring a touchdown, but he once again missed out on a really nice high upside day because he just wasn't able to put together the performance on the ground that was needed to give you really top level fantasy stats. And this week against Atlanta is not going to be any easier for him. And unfortunately, that ceiling is going to be a really, really big question mark for me this week, especially given how he's ran on the ground this year. And for Bijan, there's always going to be an opportunity for him to make an impact in the passing game. But this is going to be one of those matchups where we probably find him at least towards the bottom end of RB1s, if not just on the outside of it. We knew last week that Cleveland was going to be a much tougher matchup for Kyren Williams, and he still played very well. Now, luckily for us, Sean McVay is a fan of fantasy football and wanted to make sure that Kyren Williams got that touchdown for everybody that played him and got him into the end zone there. So kudos to Sean McVay for being the anti-Arthur Smith. But for Kyren Williams, this is also going to be a little bit more of a tougher matchup, but we know for sure that he is going to get the volume. I mean, what running backs in the NFL right now are averaging like 20 touches a game, over 100 yards per game, scoring touchdowns? He is the lead back, and he is not giving up touches to anybody else. Sean McVay likes using one running back. So while his ceiling once again this week may be a little bit lower, he's definitely going to be a lot safer, because even though it is a tough matchup once again, it is not nearly as tough as Cleveland is, and Cleveland still gave up some decent yards to Kyren Williams last week. So he's going to be in our lineup, and he's going to be a guy that maybe he doesn't have top 5 potential, but is still within the 6 to 12 range. Pretty easy. Right now, the name of the game with the Baltimore backfield is Gus Edwards needs to score and Keaton Mitchell needs to hit some big plays. Now Keaton Mitchell continues to see like a small uptick in his usage. He's not really being utilized like a locked in stone RB2, because Gus Edwards, Keaton Mitchell, and Justice Hill are all rotating and all getting touches. Lamar Jackson still runs the football a little bit, and we know this offense is loving to pass it this year. So Keaton Mitchell really hasn't become a mid-tier safety valve at the running back position as of yet. I just can't put him at yellow because of the amount of volume he is getting and the amount of volumes that the other running backs are getting right now. Because Gus Edwards is getting the red zone touches, all right? Even though he's not getting a ton of volume in between the 20s, he's still being utilized pretty consistently there. And then when they get in the red zone or near the goal line, it's Gus Edwards. He's getting those high leverage touchdown carries. And then Keaton Mitchell, he's getting touches in between the 20s, but he's not really getting enough right now. So he's really, really reliant on hitting big runs and big catches out of the backfield. If you need to use Keaton Mitchell, you probably can. He's not the worst flex option in the world right now, but now that we're done with the buys, we have a lot more choices to put in the flex. Really, we need to get rid of Justice Hill. If Justice Hill could stop seeing snaps and we could give all of those to Keaton Mitchell would be a yellow and he would be a really good flex option. But we're going to need to see a little bit more of that consistency before we can get too excited. The last time Detroit and Chicago got together, man, those pesky Bears did raise the blood pressure of Lions fans just a little bit, but Detroit ended up walking away with the win at the end of the game. And this game, I do expect to go the Lions' way just a little bit better. I do think they're going to be a little bit more up for this game. And even though Chicago right now allows the fewest rushing yards to opposing running backs, that didn't seem to bother David Montgomery a couple of weeks ago. I expect him to once again to want to stick it to Chicago, get out there and run right at them, especially going back into their stadium. David Montgomery is definitely a really safer bet right now than what Jahmyr Gibbs is. And when you take a look at the statistics right now and what we've seen usage-wise over the last couple of weeks, David Montgomery is really seeing the bulk of the work right now, and Jahmyr Gibbs is coming in as more of a change of pace than an actual 50-50 split. Now, I talked about it on the live show on Monday a little bit and kind of tried to figure out why that is, and maybe it's just one of those things where they gave Jahmyr Gibbs so many touches there in that stretch of the midpoint of the season that they're just trying to wean him back a little bit before they get him going again for the playoff run so they can try to keep everybody healthy since everybody has been banged up. So right now, David Montgomery is going to be a guy that's going to be locked into probably that 10 to 15 range every single week because the volume is there every single week, regardless of the team that they are playing, especially if Detroit can get out in front and use the positive game script to run the football. Jahmyr Gibbs is a guy that's a little bit more towards the back end RB2 portion for me right now because he is going to be a little bit riskier, even if he brings a little bit more upside potential because of the work that he can do with big playability and in the passing game. Now, for the Chicago Bears, we're really kind of in this nowhere land of running backs right now with them because D'Onta Foreman has been hurt. Roschon Johnson really hasn't taken off yet this year. And Khalil Herbert he's done okay at times, but he hasn't provided high leverage usage except for a couple of weeks at the beginning of the season before getting hurt. They kind of take over the lead back role and just keep it the entire way. So going up against such a stingy Detroit defense on the ground, this week I probably would be out on the running backs for Chicago. And that could end up changing here over the next couple of days if there's any injury announcements or anything like that. But for right now, if you don't absolutely need one of the Chicago backs, I'm probably not going to pick them in this one. Indianapolis and Cincinnati should bring some real nice potential for upside at the running back position because both of these defenses are in the bottom third of rushing yards allowed so far this season. And Zach Moss coming in for Jonathan Taylor last week brought a lot of hope to fantasy owners that either handcuffed Taylor with him or had been holding Zach Moss since Taylor came back in the hopes of that being able to use him at some point this fantasy season would become an option once again. And unfortunately, it was underwhelming and he underperformed. But going up against Cincinnati, he should have a real shot to kind of get back on track and be a top 12 option once again. Well, at least inside the top 15, I would hope. And for Joe Mixon, don't look now, but he is inside the top 10 running backs for the 2023 season. And for a lot of you that have been okay with his performance this year, but not super excited about it, he's really turned it up the last several weeks because now Joe Mixon is only 1.5 points behind Rachaad White to be the RB6 on the season and less than 10 points behind Derrick Henry to possibly jump all the way up to RB4. Since their bye week, Joe Mixon has scored at least 15 fantasy points in 4 of their 6 games and at least 10 fantasy points in 5 of those 6 games. He truly is becoming a very steady back down the stretch here for us. The injury to Joe Burrow, a lot of people thought it could end up hurting Joe Mixon. It's only got him more involved in the game plan at this point, which has been really good for those of us that have been using him all season long. And now here down the stretch in a matchup against Indianapolis, who has struggled to stop the run all year long, he definitely looks like a guy with top 5 potential once again. All right, I've got to be very, very clear about this, and hopefully you're listening and not just looking at the graphics. But once again, let me remind you that red doesn't mean sit, okay? Red just means that the player is going to have some very, very risky potential for this week. And that is exactly what is going on with Travis Etienne. Did he play decently well against Cincinnati? Yeah. Total overall yards were pretty good, scored a touchdown, had some receptions, finished as the RB12. But he doesn't look healthy, and he hasn't looked healthy in a couple of weeks. And now we're going to be running into an even bigger issue with the fact that Christian Kirk is hurt and Trevor Lawrence is hurt. And that's going to be a huge hit to this offense going in against the #1 defense in the entire NFL. So do I have Travis Etienne listed in red because of Travis Etienne? Not entirely. Some of it is the fact that I do believe he is banged up and maybe is just a little on the sore side right now and not allowing him to be the running back that we know he can be. But CJ Beathard is the starting quarterback with one of your top wide receivers missing this week, is not going to be good going up against the number one overall defense that can shut down a run at any time they want to. I'm really worried about Travis Etienne's upside this week, and I do think there is a possibility he finishes outside the top 12. Are we sitting him? Absolutely not. You can't. You can't afford to. But just temper expectations and know that Travis Etienne may not give you a whole lot of points this week. Now, Jerome Ford is going to have just a tough matchup because Jacksonville allows the 5th fewest rushing yards in the NFL right now. But we've also seen that Jerome Ford is getting a decent amount of work in the passing game and is definitely getting more snaps than Kareem Hunt. So really, when you take a look at it, Jerome Ford, based on the type of gameplay that Cleveland should see this week, will probably see a majority more snaps than Kareem Hunt once again. They're not going to put Kareem Hunt in the backfield and just run right at Jacksonville. They're going to be doing some different things with Jerome Ford, and hopefully Joe Flacco, yeah, it's 2023 and I'm talking about Joe Flacco, can help open up the run game just a little bit for Jerome Ford. Not a ton of upside for me this week, but hopefully he gets a few targets in the passing game, and who knows, maybe he gets that one lucky touchdown like he did last week. It does feel like there's a little bit of a chink in the armor of the Saints defensive front, because over the last 4 weeks, we've seen them be more vulnerable to the run than what they were at the beginning of the season, allowing the 11th most rushing yards over the last 4 weeks. Chuba Hubbard, over the last couple of weeks, had lost a lot of touches to Miles Sanders, and it almost looked like they were going back to a pure 50-50 split. And then out of nowhere last week, Chuba Hubbard was the lead back by a wide margin once again and had a really, really good fantasy day. So going up against the Saints, there is going to be some risk that Hubbard does not reach the type of potential that we would like. But also, the Saints haven't been able to stop the run as well as of late. And because of that, it does give us an opportunity to hopefully get some decent fantasy production out of them, even if it's just RB2 type production. It's very likely that Alvin Kamara will be the RB2 this week. Carolina cannot stop the run to save their life, and Alvin Kamara gets tons of dump-offs. Even Jameson Williams was still trying to get him the ball this past week. So even if Derek Carr ends up missing this week, being in the concussion protocol once again, as of this recording, he is in the concussion protocol, Kamara should still see a pretty decent day on the ground, even if we see some of that upside from the passing game come down a little bit, because Jameis Winston is just out there slinging, baby. I really feel like Houston and New York is going to be a whole lot of what ifs. Now, Devin Singletary lost a ton of touches this past week to Dameon Pierce. Even with how well Devin Singletary was playing, it does look like that this backfield is at least a 50-50 split. And on the ground, it did favor Dameon Pierce a little bit more last week. The New York Jets have a defensive front that is going to allow some decent running games to running backs. But I don't know who the technical lead back is right now for Houston. Again, Dameon Pierce saw a majority of the touches on the ground. As far as snaps were, they were basically 50-50. Devin Singletary may see some more targets in the passing game, but that was even closer to even this past week. It's definitely going to be something that we have to monitor moving forward, but it's not something that I really feel like I'm willing to bet on this week, even though the matchup is a pretty good one that we would like to try and take advantage of. And for Breece Hall, the questions continue to be like, where are the explosive plays at? And really, it's just not his fault. And when you take a look at it, the New York Jets are just a mess on offense right now. They tried to go to Zach Wilson, then they've tried to go to, listen, I don't even need to name all the quarterbacks because you probably aren't that familiar with all of them anyway. But they're trying to go back to Zach Wilson once again this week. So for me, Breece Hall, this is a really tough matchup on the ground. And if he's going to make any type of top 12 potential, it's going to have to be through the air. But even with that being said, we haven't seen that type of upside recently anyway. The Las Vegas Raiders clearly have a bottom tier run defense. And I really think a lot of us are just waiting on Minnesota to make a decision on what they are going to do at the running back position. Madison has looked okay at times this season, but he continues to have an issue with fumbles and situations that he should not be putting the ball on the ground. And Ty Chandler has shown some explosiveness, but they haven't really been willing to give him a good amount of touches with Alexander Mattison healthy. It just feels like Minnesota doesn't want to give up on Mattison. And part of me can understand that, but we're also trying to figure out if we can play Mattison on a weekly basis. Can we play Chandler on a weekly basis? Is one going to take over for the other? Are we going to get any clear-cut answers? And hopefully against Las Vegas this week, we do see some more clear-cut answers. And for me, going into this matchup, I'm willing to bet on Alexander Mattison once again, because I do feel like he is going to continue to be the lead back until he royally screws up, or until Ty Chandler just makes it known that you cannot put him on the bench. One of those two things could absolutely happen this week, but that's why Chandler brings more risk than Mattison does, because with Chandler, maybe he does have a little bit more upside with his big playability, but I just don't think he gets the touches that Mattison does this week. Now, Josh Jacobs is going to be in green this week, but it is a very tough matchup, and he's right on the borderline of being like a yellow-green player. And the reason he's being left in green is because how many running backs truly are getting over 20 touches a game right now? There's not many of them. And since the change in the coaching staff, they have made it known that they want to try and get the ball in his hands more and more often. And that's one of the reasons why I'm going to leave him in green. Even with the tougher matchup, he continues to see lots and lots of touches. And because of that, that's going to give him a pretty decent floor every single week, even if the tougher matchup screws with his upside. Man, this would have been a really fun running back matchup to watch, but we don't have a whole lot of clarification on Kenneth Walker or Zach Charbonnet this early in the week. Kenneth Walker, dealing with the oblique injury, definitely was going to miss some time, so not sure if this is going to be the matchup where they try to work him back in. Zach Charbonnet does look like he avoided a serious knee injury, but he has bruised his knee, and last week, Pete Carroll gave no indication on whether or not Charbonnet was going to be ready to go here in week 14. We're going to have to monitor both of these running backs throughout the entire week, and if neither of them can go, DJ Dallas will end up probably being the starter. And against San Francisco, I don't know if anybody should be playing DJ Dallas. There's not really a whole lot to say about Christian McCaffrey. If you used a first-round pick on him, congratulations, because you have had really the one and only steady running back all season long. And the best part about it, he continues to stay healthy. CMC is the #1 running back, and given this matchup going up against Seattle, whose defense has started to kind of break down a little bit here towards the back end of the season, Christian McCaffrey should be in for a huge day once again. It's really crazy to think, with as frustrating as James Cook has been to own this season, that he's still putting up over 86 total yards per game on only 15 touches. In fact, he's putting up more yards per game on less touches than Isaiah Pacheco is, and he's darn near averaging 5 yards per carry. The biggest issue with James Cook is I think people are a little bit frustrated that we're continuing to watch these other running backs get some touches over him, and the fact that James Cook just isn't scoring as much as we would have liked. But his ability to be on the field in the passing downs and in the running downs has continued to keep him in kind of that safe category this season. Yeah, maybe he hasn't reached high RB2 potential or even low RB1 potential, but if you put him in your lineup, you're getting decent points every week. And going up against Kansas City, a little bit of a tougher matchup, but the run game hasn't been as good as it was earlier in the year, and James Cook once again could see decent output, even if we're left wishing that there was more upside to go with it. Isaiah Pacheco continues to be good. Not great by any means, but not even close to bad. He's definitely one running back. And when we take a look back on this season and what this season had at the running back position, we're going to say, man, he was safe. He gave us a good floor every single week, and for the most part, we knew what we were going to get. And that's why for weeks leading up to the trade deadline in fantasy football leagues, I was telling everybody Isaiah Pacheco is a guy that you should be targeting, because some owners out there might not be super happy with his fantasy upside every single week. And because of that, if you add him to your roster, he's a guy that you will just be happy with having a safe floor. And sometimes in fantasy football, we just have to take the safe floor. Maybe they aren't scoring the highest upside that we'd like to see every single week, but going up against Buffalo this week, Isaiah Pacheco once again will have a really nice, safe floor, but he will provide that high ceiling as well. The Broncos and Chargers are going to bring us a couple of running backs that we are just begging to see some upside from. Now, Javonte Williams, his usage has ticked up over the last several weeks, and it's been good to see him be firmly as the lead back in that offense. But coming back from that knee injury last year, the explosiveness has just lacked a little bit, and we haven't really seen that yet, and it might be next year before a lot of that starts to come back, and that's okay. But in this matchup against the Los Angeles Chargers, the upside that we've been waiting for from him could finally present itself, and I do think that we see one of the best performances for Javonte Williams that we've seen all season long. In fact, I'm willing to take his line of 54.5 rushing yards and pound the over on Underdog right now. Listen, the fantasy season may be almost over with, but if you don't want to give up on football just yet, join us over on Underdog and start playing some of these player pick'ems with us that we've been absolutely smashing, and our community has been winning recently. So if you're interested in playing this pick'em of Javonte Williams or any of the other ones that we talk about throughout the week, make sure you head on over to Underdog, and when you sign up and make your first time deposit of at least $10, use code word headliners. When you do that, Underdog is going to match your deposit up to $100, and you're going to get a special pick'em to play that is almost guaranteed to hit that week. But I think the real question here is going to be Austin Ekeler, and what are we going to get out of him the rest of the season? The biggest issue right now with Austin Ekeler is not Austin Ekeler. Blame the coaching staff. They hired Kellen Moore to open up this offense, and it really feels like Staley's got his hands all over the game plan and is trying to make decisions that Kellen Moore should just be making himself. Blame injuries. They've had a ton of injuries at the wide receiver position, and it has allowed defenses to really just let Keenan Allen do whatever he wants to do, lock down the other wide receivers, and then crash in on Austin Ekeler and the run. And Ekeler hasn't been getting nearly as many targets as I would have hoped either, given the amount of injuries that they have had. Right now, Los Angeles just feels and looks like a dumpster fire. And until they get rid of the coaching staff, I don't think anything is going to change for Justin Herbert or this team. Now, Austin Ekeler is a guy that on a weekly basis, I really don't know how we can sit him. If you really have really good running backs that can go in over Austin Ekeler, then by all means do it. If you're running around with 4 top 12 running backs, make it work, baby. More power to you. You drafted well or you made some good trades. For Austin Ekeler, though, he's probably going to be a guy that's going to land inside the top 24 instead of the top 12 for a majority of the rest of the season, even in better matchups. The last time these two teams got together, it was all about the quarterback play. Very minimal performances from DeAndre Swift and Tony Pollard. The problem with DeAndre Swift right now is he's kind of in a downward trend. We are really seeing a lot of the reasons why Detroit decided to just part ways with him. He has stayed healthy this season, but he hasn't really been able to hold up to the big workload that he saw at the beginning of the year. He definitely doesn't have the oomph that he had for those first couple of games after he became the starter. And it looks like Kenneth Gainwell is going to start getting on the field a little bit more as well. And going up against this Dallas front this week, I just don't think there's going to be a whole lot of upside to have for DeAndre Swift. And for Tony Pollard, he has played better as of recent, but I think the name of the game is scoring for him. He's definitely going to get enough touches to put him probably in that 12 to 15 carry range, but I don't think the yards per carry are going to be enough to put him much higher than maybe 40 or 50 yards. Dallas is going to have to get in the red zone, and they are going to have to score with Tony Pollard for him to see any type of RB1 potential this week, I believe. And Philadelphia, after getting absolutely smashed last week by San Francisco, I really do believe that they are going to come ready to play this week. If I had to put money on this game, though, I think Dallas is going to walk away with the win at home. My Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week is going to be Tennessee and Miami. With Christmas right around the corner, make sure you head on over to manscaped.com if you're looking for stocking stuffers or some awesome gifts to put under the tree. And make sure you also use code word headliners when you check out, because you're going to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. Manscaped's got a ton of great new products on the shelf right now. Make sure you head on over and check check those out. Now, it does appear that Derrick Henry is not going to be in the concussion protocol as was announced yesterday, which is really good for his potential to play this week. He had to leave that game early, but if he's not in the protocol, he should be good to go for Monday Night Football here in week 14. Miami's defense, especially the run defense, has been surprisingly a lot better than anticipated. I thought they were going to be better this year, but they have been exceptional at times. So Derrick Henry is going to find himself in one of those situations again where if Tennessee falls behind by a lot, then it will be Tyjae Spears on the field a little bit more often. So maybe the ceiling isn't what we need with Derrick Henry this week, but in December, Derrick Henry turns it up. And who knows, maybe he builds on last week's performance, finds a couple of holes, and has a really big play for us this week that helps make his entire fantasy day. Now, the biggest reason this is my matchup to watch is because I know we're going to be getting a lot of questions about Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert this week. Now, if you started Achane last week, perfect. You took the risk of something happening again, and you got the upside and hopefully some help towards a win for you. For Raheem Mostert, he found the end zone and had a pretty decent fantasy day. And I do think here over the last few games, we're probably going to see Devon Achane a little bit more often than what we'll see Raheem Mostert. But Raheem Mostert is still fantasy viable. Maybe not high-end RB1 like we have seen at times, but even if he gives us RB2 like performances, that is still good enough to be starting him in this offense. And really the biggest reason for that is at 32 years old, I think Raheem Mostert is probably going to see his touches just scaled back a little bit to ensure that he is going to be healthy for the playoff and let Devon Achane get in there a little bit more often since he's missed time anyway and is probably going to be a little bit more fresh than what Mostert is right now. So Achane for me the rest of the way is going to have some of those mid to high RB1 numbers, and on the safe floor side, probably a low end RB1. Raheem Mostert is still going to be fantasy viable, is still going to be startable, but probably a middle of the pack RB2 for me instead of high end RB1. We get two Monday Night Football games this week with Green Bay and New York being the other one. Now, when you take a look at the Green Bay running backs, Aaron Jones, really no idea on when he is going to be able to return. He got a little bit limited practice last week, not very much. It looks like mostly just side work instead of getting actually on the field and getting back into the rotation of things. So A.J. Dillon will likely be the guy once again. And if you want to play A.J. Dillon, he'll probably give you low-end RB2 numbers. That's no joke. He's literally been RB24 2 of the last 3 weeks, and his other performance was fringe RB2 status. So he's not giving you any upside whatsoever, and he's literally giving you just enough points that if you have to start him, you can, but they're not great points, and they're not helping you win anything. So there is risk going up against New York this week that he's not able to reach any type of that upside, but hopefully he's able to run the ball a little bit more efficiently against a defense that does give up quite a few yards on the ground. Green Bay's defense, however, allows the 4th most rushing yards, and I would be willing to bet that the New York Giants are going to try and attack that this week. They're going to run right at Green Bay, and Saquon Barkley is going to be the guy that's going to be getting the touches, and Saquon Barkley is probably going to make a case for RB1 overall status this week. Am I going to rank him above Christian McCaffrey? Absolutely not, but he's going to be in my top 3 running backs for sure, because this is a matchup that he is absolutely going to be able to take advantage of, and he's going to have some really, really high upside, especially after what Isaiah Pacheco did to Green Bay last week. Yo, Headliner Nation, I appreciate you all tuning into today's video, but for now, I got to go talk about tight ends. I got to go do rankings and all the other stuff to finish up week 14 content for you all. Do me a favor though, if you appreciate the work that we're doing, hit the like button for us, and of course, turn on those notifications. So anytime we drop content or go live, you're going to know about it right away. But for now, Headliner Nation, stay safe and healthy for me, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.